Eliza Nolan's feet ached with every step, the dust of the Oregon Trail clinging to her sweat-dampened dress as she trudged 30 yards behind the last wagon in the train. The harsh summer sun of 1853 beat down upon her uncovered head, her bonnet having been lost 2 days prior during a river crossing. She wiped her brow with her handkerchief, already soaked through, and continued her labored march westward. "Keep moving, girl." Samuel Wilkins, the wagon master, called back without bothering to turn around. "We've got another 5 miles before we make camp, and I'll not have you slowing us down." Eliza bit her lip to keep from crying. It had been this way for 3 weeks now, ever since her aunt and uncle had joined the wagon train in Independence, Missouri. When the first wheel broke under the weight of their wagon, Uncle Harold had blamed her. "Too much weight," he'd declared loudly enough for everyone to hear. "The girl eats like 3 men and weighs down the wagon something terrible." That night, Aunt Martha had taken her aside. "Your uncle says you're to walk behind from now on. We can't risk another broken wheel." There had been no argument, no discussion. The next morning, Eliza found her few possessions packed into a small satchel, and she was instructed to follow on foot at 18. Eliza had no choice but to obey. Orphaned at 16 after her parents died of influenza, she'd been sent to live with her father's brother and his wife. They had never wanted her, making it clear she was a burden. Now, heading west to Oregon Territory, she was an even greater inconvenience. Eliza stumbled on a rock, barely catching herself before falling. Her throat burned with thirst, her water canteen empty since midday. The wagon train continued its steady pace, indifferent to her struggle. The cruel comments from the other travelers had died down after the first week, replaced by indifference. She had become invisible, a shameful shadow trailing the hopeful pioneers. As the sun dipped lower on the horizon, Eliza heard the sound of approaching hoofbeats. She stepped aside, assuming it was one of the outriders returning to the train. Instead, a deep voice called out, "Miss, are you all right?" Looking up, Eliza found herself staring at a tall cowboy mounted on a magnificent buckskin horse. His face was partially hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat, but she could see kind eyes studying her with concern. He wasn't part of their train. His clothes were different, more worn and practical than the Eastern attire of most in their company. "I'm fine, thank you," she replied automatically, though her parched lips cracked as she spoke. The stranger dismounted in one fluid motion. Up close, she could see he was young, perhaps in his mid-20s, with sun-weathered skin and a strong jawline shadowed with stubble. "You don't look fine," he said, offering his canteen. "Drink this." Eliza hesitated only a moment before accepting. The water was cool and sweet, and she had to force herself to take small sips rather than gulping it all down. "I'm Jack Everett," he said, taking back the canteen after she'd drunk her fill. "Most folks call me Jack." "Eliza Nolan," she replied, suddenly conscious of her appearance, her hair disheveled, dress stained with dirt and sweat, face flushed from exertion and heat. "Why are you walking alone behind the wagon train, Miss Nolan? It's dangerous country." Eliza looked down, shame coloring her cheeks. "The wagon master and my uncle say I'm too substantial to ride. I break the wheels, they say." Jack's expression darkened. "That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard." He glanced ahead at the wagon train, now nearly a quarter-mile distant. "How long have they had you walking like this?" 3 weeks now, she admitted quietly. Without another word, Jack led his horse closer and said, "Well, Miss Nolan, I won't have it. Thunder here is strong as they come, and he can carry us both easily." He extended his hand. "If you'll permit me." Eliza stared at his outstretched hand, scarcely believing what was happening. "But," the wagon master said. "I don't much care what the wagon master said," Jack interrupted, his voice firm but gentle. "No decent man lets a lady suffer this way." With trembling fingers, Eliza took his hand. Jack helped her mount the buckskin, then swung up behind her. The horse didn't even seem to notice the additional weight as Jack clicked his tongue and set Thunder into a trot. "Where are you headed?" Eliza asked, acutely aware of the arm that wrapped securely around her waist to keep her steady. "Same place as your train, I reckon. I've been scouting ahead for another group that's about 2 days behind you. I'm heading back to them now, but I'll see you safely to your camp first." As they approached the wagon train, Eliza felt her anxiety rise. "They won't like this," she whispered. "Let me worry about that," Jack replied, his breath warm against her ear. The wagon train had stopped for the night, circles of activity forming as women began preparing supper and men tended to oxen and horses. Heads turned as Jack rode into camp with Eliza, whispers spreading like wildfire. Uncle Harold emerged from their wagon, his face contorting with anger when he spotted his niece. "Girl, what do you think you're doing?" he bellowed, stomping toward them. "Get down from there immediately." Jack dismounted first, then helped Eliza down with gentlemanly care. He kept a protective stance beside her as Harold approached. "Sir," Jack said, his voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of steel, "I found your niece nearly collapsed from heat and exhaustion. Making her walk behind the train is not only cruel but dangerous." "This is none of your business, stranger," Harold spat. "The girl is my responsibility and I'll decide how she travels." By now, Samuel Wilkins had joined them, along with several other men from the train. "What's going on here?" the wagon master demanded. Jack stood tall, unflinching. "I'm Jackson Everett, scout for the Taylor train 2 days back. I found this young woman walking alone, miles behind you all, with no water and no protection. I'm wondering what kind of wagon master allows such a thing." Wilkins shifted uncomfortably. "The girl's too heavy for the wagons." "We've already had breakdowns because of her." "That's nonsense, and you know it," Jack replied. "I've seen wagons carry twice their weight in supplies. One person, regardless of size, doesn't break wheels." Martha approached, her pinched face revealing her displeasure. "She's been nothing but trouble since she came to live with us. We can't afford another broken axle." Eliza's cheeks burned with humiliation as they spoke about her as if she weren't present. She stared at the ground, wishing it would open and swallow her whole. "My horse carried us both with no trouble," Jack pointed out. "Surely one of your wagons can manage." A murmur rippled through the gathering crowd. Several women exchanged uncomfortable glances, and Eliza noticed that a few looked ashamed. "She stays with the wagons from now on," Jack continued, "or I ride back to the Taylor train and tell them to choose another route. I doubt you want to lose the protection of traveling together." Wilkins glared but finally nodded. "Fine. She can ride in one of the wagons." He turned to Harold. "But if there's any trouble with your wheels, it's on you to fix it." "She's not riding with us," Harold stated flatly. "We've no room." An older woman stepped forward. "She can ride with us. My husband and I have plenty of space since our children are grown." Eliza recognized Mrs. Jenkins, a kindly woman who had occasionally slipped her extra food during their noon stops. "That's settled then," Jack said with finality. He turned to Eliza, his voice softening. "Miss Nolan, I'll be back to check on you in 2 days when our trains meet up. Mrs. Jenkins will take good care of you, I'm sure." "Thank you," Eliza whispered, still stunned by his intervention. As darkness fell, Eliza found herself welcomed at the Jenkins fire. For the first time in weeks, she ate a full meal and slept on blankets instead of the hard ground. She fell asleep wondering if she would truly see Jack Everett again, or if he had simply been a mirage born of desperation. True to his word, Jack returned 2 days later when the Taylor train caught up with them. Eliza's heart leapt at the sight of him riding into camp, his eyes scanning the wagons until he spotted her helping Mrs. Jenkins with the washing. "Miss Nolan," he greeted, tipping his hat. "I'm glad to see you looking better." "Thanks to you, Mr. Everett," she replied, a shy smile forming on her lips. "Jack, please," he corrected. "I was hoping I might speak with you a while if Mrs. Jenkins can spare you." The older woman waved them off with a knowing smile. "Go on, dear, the washing can wait." Jack led Eliza to a fallen log at the edge of camp, a respectable distance that maintained propriety but allowed for private conversation. "How have you been treated?" he asked, his concern genuine. "Much better," Eliza assured him. "The Jenkins have been very kind. My aunt and uncle barely acknowledge me, which is an improvement, actually." Jack nodded, his eyes studying her face. "I'll be riding with your train from now on. The Wagon masters agreed to combine our groups for safety." Eliza couldn't help the rush of pleasure at this news. That's good to hear. "I thought perhaps," Jack continued, suddenly seeming less sure of himself, "that you might like to learn to ride. Thunder's gentle, and it would give you some independence." The thought of learning to control such a magnificent animal terrified and thrilled Eliza in equal measure. "I'd like that very much," she said. That evening, Jack joined the Jenkins for supper, telling stories of his journeys across the territories. Eliza learned he had been born in Kentucky, but had headed west as soon as he was old enough, working as a ranch hand before becoming a scout. "My pa wanted me to be a lawyer like him," Jack explained, "but I couldn't stand being cooped up indoors. The first time I saw the open plains, I knew I'd found where I belonged." "And your family?" Mrs. Jenkins inquired gently. A shadow crossed Jack's face. "Lost Ma when I was 16. Pa remarried a year later. We didn't get along, his new wife and I, so I struck out on my own. Haven't been back east since." Eliza felt a kinship in their shared orphaned state, though she kept the thought to herself. The next day, Jack began teaching Eliza to ride. He started with the basics: how to mount properly, how to hold the reins, how to sit in the saddle. "Don't grip with your knees," he advised, standing close beside Thunder as Eliza sat nervously atop the horse. "Relax into it. Thunder can feel every tension in your body." Eliza tried to loosen her death grip on the saddle horn. "I'm afraid I'll fall," she admitted. "I won't let that happen," Jack promised, his hand resting reassuringly on her leg. The warmth of his touch sent an unexpected flutter through her stomach. Day by day, as the wagon train continued its westward journey, Eliza's confidence grew. Jack was a patient teacher, and Thunder seemed to understand that his rider was a novice. By the end of the first week, Eliza was riding alongside the wagons rather than in them, proud of her newfound skill. The transformation wasn't just in her riding ability. Away from her aunt and uncle's constant criticism, Eliza began to emerge from her shell. Mrs. Jenkins ensured she had proper meals, and the daily exercise of riding strengthened her. Though still a large woman, Eliza carried herself with growing confidence. She also noticed the way Jack watched her not with disgust or pity, but with genuine admiration. When she successfully trotted Thunder in a circle for the first time, Jack's face lit up with such pride that Eliza felt beautiful for perhaps the first time in her life. "You're a natural," he told her, helping her dismount. His hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary. Their lessons continued each day, becoming the highlight of Eliza's existence. Jack, she discovered, was more than just kind. He was intelligent, funny, and possessed a quiet strength she found deeply attractive. They talked about everything: his adventures in the territories, her childhood in Pennsylvania, books they had both read, dreams for the future. "What will you do when you reach Oregon?" Jack asked one afternoon as they walked their horses back to camp. Eliza sighed. "I don't know. My aunt and uncle plan to start a dry goods store. I suppose I'll help there until..." "Until what?" "Until they marry me off to someone willing to take me, I expect," she replied, trying to keep the bitterness from her voice. Jack frowned. "Is that what you want?" "What I want has never mattered much," Eliza said softly. "But no, that's not what I want. I'd like to be a teacher, I think." "I've always loved children." They walked in silence for several moments before Jack spoke again. "What sort of man would you choose if the choice were yours?" Eliza felt her cheeks warm. "Someone kind," she answered honestly. "Someone who sees me for who I am, not just how I look." "You look beautiful to me," Jack said quietly. The words hung in the air between them, startling in their sincerity. Eliza couldn't bring herself to meet his gaze, afraid of what she might see or not see in his eyes. That evening, disaster struck. A summer storm rolled in with frightening speed, turning the prairie sky from blue to angry black in minutes. The wagon master called for an emergency camp, but before they could secure everything, the wind hit with terrible force. Eliza was helping Mrs. Jenkins tie down their wagon cover when she heard screams from the other side of the circle. A wagon had overturned, pinning someone beneath it. Without thinking, she ran toward the commotion. It was a child, 8-year-old Tommy Wilson, trapped beneath the heavy wagon. His mother was hysterical, his father and several men struggling to lift the massive vehicle. "We need more hands," Mr. Wilson shouted, his face red with exertion. Eliza pushed her way through the gathered crowd. "Let me help," she said, positioning herself between two men. "You." Someone scoffed. "Yes, me," Eliza replied firmly. She bent and gripped the wagon's edge. On 3, the men, desperate enough to accept any help, counted with her. Eliza summoned all her strength, the muscles she'd developed from weeks of walking and riding now put to crucial use. The wagon lifted just enough for Jack, who had appeared at her side to pull Tommy free. The boy was injured but alive, his leg badly broken. As the doctor tended to him, Eliza found herself the recipient of astonished and grateful looks. Mrs. Wilson hugged her tightly, sobbing thanks into her shoulder. "You're stronger than you look," Jack commented later, finding her alone by the Jenkins wagon. "I've always been strong," Eliza replied. "People just assume I'm weak because I'm—" She gestured vaguely at her body. "Because they're fools," Jack finished for her. He stepped closer, his eyes serious. "I've been thinking about what you said earlier, about wanting to be a teacher. What about it? I have land staked out near the Willamette Valley. Good land. I plan to build a ranch there, raise horses." He took a deep breath. "The nearest town is 5 miles off. They need a teacher." Eliza's heart began to pound. "Jack, what are you saying?" "I'm saying I care for you, Eliza Nolan, more than I thought possible in such a short time. I'm saying I see you, your kindness, your courage, your gentle heart, and I'm asking if you might consider a future that includes me." Tears welled in Eliza's eyes. "You barely know me." "I know enough," Jack replied, taking her hand in his. "I know that watching you ride makes me happier than anything else in this world. I know that your smile lights up something inside me I thought was dead. I know that I want to build a life where you never have to walk behind anyone ever again." A raindrop fell, then another, but neither of them moved. "I'm not asking for an answer now," Jack continued. "Just think about it. We've still got weeks before we reach Oregon, time for you to be sure of your own mind." The storm broke in earnest then, forcing them to run for shelter. But something had changed between them, a possibility had been named. A door opened that Eliza had never dreamed would exist for someone like her. The wagon train continued westward, crossing rivers and plains, skirting mountains and navigating rough terrain. Jack rode scout during the days, but spent every evening with Eliza. Sometimes they rode together, exploring a little beyond the confines of the camp. Other times they simply sat talking, their conversations growing deeper and more intimate. "You never ask about my weight," Eliza said one night as they sat beneath a blanket of stars. "Should I?" Jack replied. "Most people do, or at least they wonder about it." Jack was quiet for a moment. "My mother was a large woman," he finally said, "the strongest person I've ever known. She could outwork most men on our farm, and she had the biggest heart. When she died, it was like the sun went out." He turned to look at Eliza directly. "I don't care about your size, except that there's more of you to love." Eliza's heart swelled at his words. No one had ever spoken to her with such acceptance, such appreciation. "My parents loved me," she said softly. "They never made me feel less than, but after they died. My aunt and uncle made it clear that my body was shameful, a burden. They were wrong," Jack said with conviction. "There is nothing shameful about you, Eliza. Nothing." When he kissed her for the first time that night, beneath a canopy of stars, Eliza felt as though she were floating. His lips were gentle against hers, his hand cradling her face as if she were precious beyond measure. As the weeks passed, Eliza's relationship with Jack deepened, but so did her anxiety about reaching their destination. Her aunt and uncle had noticed her growing attachment to the scout, and their disapproval was evident. "He's just amusing himself with you," Aunt Martha told her bluntly one afternoon. "Men like that don't marry girls like you." Though Eliza tried to dismiss her aunt's cruel words, seeds of doubt took root. Was Jack truly serious about his proposal? Could someone like him truly love someone like her? The wagon train was a week from the Willamette Valley when disaster struck again. Jack, scouting ahead with 2 other men, was ambushed by bandits. One man was killed instantly. The other managed to escape back to the train with news that Jack had been shot and captured. The wagon master organized a rescue party, but Eliza was frantic with worry. "I'm coming with you," she insisted, already saddling Thunder. "This is no place for a woman," Wilkins argued. "Jack taught me to ride, and Thunder knows me." "I'm coming," Eliza replied, a new steel in her voice that brooked no argument. To everyone's surprise, she kept pace with the men, her determination pushing her forward even when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. They tracked the bandits to a small canyon where they found evidence of a camp. "They've moved on," one of the men said, examining tracks. "Heading north." "Jack's blood," another pointed out, indicating dark stains on the ground. Eliza felt sick with fear but forced herself to think clearly. "Look," she said, pointing to a narrow game trail that seemed to branch off from the main tracks. "There are different prints here." Just one horse, moving carefully. The men looked skeptical, but with no better option, they followed her suggestion. The trail led them to a small cave half hidden by brush, where they found Jack, pale and wounded but alive, having managed to escape during the night and hide himself away. "Eliza," he whispered when he saw her, his face lighting up despite his pain. She rushed to him, tears streaming down her face. "I thought I'd lost you." "Not a chance," he replied weakly. "I promised to build you that ranch, remember?" They brought Jack back to the wagon train, where the doctor tended his wounds. The bullet had passed through his shoulder, missing vital organs but causing significant blood loss. For days, Eliza barely left his side, nursing him with tender care. "You saved my life," Jack told her on the 3rd day, when his fever had finally broken. "They said you insisted on coming, that you found the trail." "I couldn't bear the thought of never seeing you again," Eliza admitted. "I love you, Jack." "I think I have since you first offered me water on that dusty road." Jack's hand found hers, squeezing weakly. "Marry me, Eliza. Not someday, not when we reach Oregon. Marry me now, before we arrive. I don't want to spend another day not being your husband." The Jenkins helped arrange everything. The wagon master, impressed by Eliza's courage during the rescue, agreed to perform the ceremony. Even Eliza's aunt and uncle attended, though they remained stone-faced throughout. The wedding took place at sunset, with the Cascade Mountains providing a majestic backdrop. Jack, still weak but determined to stand for his vows, looked at Eliza with undisguised adoration. She wore a dress borrowed from Mrs. Jenkins, hastily altered to fit her fuller figure, with wildflowers woven into her hair. "I take you, Eliza Nolan, to be my lawfully wedded wife," Jack said, his voice carrying across the hushed gathering. "I promise to love and cherish you all the days of my life, to protect you, to honor you, and to always see the beautiful soul that you are." When Eliza spoke her vows, her voice trembled with emotion. "I take you, Jackson Everett, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love and support you, to stand by your side through all of life's journeys, and to never forget that you were the first to truly see me." They reached the Willamette Valley 5 days later. Eliza's aunt and uncle, true to form, barely said goodbye before heading to the town where they planned to open their store. Eliza felt nothing but relief at their departure, her future now tied to Jack and the dreams they shared. Jack's land was everything he had described: fertile soil bordered by forest on one side and a clear stream on the other. The nearest town, though small, was growing rapidly with the influx of new settlers. "It's perfect," Eliza breathed when they first rode onto the property, thunder carrying them both just as he had that first day. "We'll build the house there," Jack said, pointing to a gentle rise that offered views in all directions. "And the stables over there, near the stream. And maybe someday, a small schoolhouse right here, where you can teach." They started with a cabin, Jack working alongside hired help to build their first home. Eliza planted a garden and began introducing herself to neighbors, who welcomed the prospect of a proper teacher for their children. By the following spring, their ranch was taking shape. Jack had acquired a small herd of horses and was gaining a reputation for his skill in training them. Eliza had started teaching in their front room, with 6 students coming regularly for lessons. "I have something to tell you," Eliza said one evening as they sat on their porch, watching the sunset paint the valley in gold. She took Jack's hand and placed it on her stomach. "We're going to have a baby." Jack's expression transformed from surprise to pure joy. He gathered Eliza into his arms, kissing her deeply. "A baby," he repeated, wonder in his voice. "Our baby." "Are you happy?" Eliza asked, the last vestiges of her old insecurities surfacing. "Happy doesn't begin to describe it," Jack answered, his hand caressing her face. "You've given me everything I never knew I wanted, Eliza. A home, a purpose, and now a family." Their son, Samuel James Everett, was born the following winter, a healthy, sturdy boy with his father's eyes and his mother's gentle temperament. As Eliza nursed him in the rocking chair Jack had carved for her, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. "What are you thinking about?" Jack asked, coming in from tending the horses, his face flushed from the cold. "About how far we've come," Eliza replied. "If my uncle hadn't forced me to walk behind the wagon train, if you hadn't come along that day." Jack knelt beside her chair, his hand gently stroking their son's head. "I believe some things are meant to be, Eliza. I was always going to find you, if not on that trail, then somewhere else." "Do you really believe that?" "With all my heart," Jack affirmed. "Some souls are just meant to find each other." 3 years later, their daughter Amelia Rose joined the family, followed 2 years after by twins Michael and Matthew. The Everett Ranch prospered, becoming known throughout the territory for its fine horses. Eliza's school grew from the front room of their cabin to a proper schoolhouse built on their property, where she taught the children of settlers from miles around. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Jack surprised Eliza with a journey back to the spot where they had first met. The Oregon Trail was still active, though the route had been improved over the years. They stood together, watching a wagon train pass in the distance. "I used to dream about this," Eliza said, leaning against her husband's strong shoulder. "Standing tall instead of walking behind, being seen instead of ignored, being loved instead of tolerated. You are seen and loved more than you know," Jack replied, turning her to face him. "By our children, by our community, and most of all by me. You, Eliza Everett, are the best thing that ever happened to me." "And you, Jackson Everett, are the best thing that ever happened to me," she replied, standing on tiptoe to kiss him. As they rode home together on Thunder's Descendants, the old buckskin, now enjoying a peaceful retirement in their pasture Eliza, reflected on how a journey that had begun in shame and cruelty had led her to such profound happiness. The Obese girl forced to walk behind the wagon train had found not just a ride, but a partner who walked beside her, who saw her true worth, and who loved her exactly as she was.